Hello guys, today I'm gonna show you how to build authentication module with Zend Framework 2 and Doctrine 2. The difference between the previous lesson, which I already published, is that I'm gonna use right now Doctrine 2 object relational mapping technique data mapper. Okay, so let's see how we can start. As usual, we start by building a module into our folder modules, and I'm gonna call it out Doctrine, which comes from authentication with Doctrine. Out Doctrine. Gonna build everything in front of you. I want to make sure that I'm not gonna forget something. The first thing to create here, of course, is one file module, PHP, and inside, as usual, we have to have class called module, and of course define the namespace PHP namespace out Doctrine. Class module, and we are almost ready to go. Now we have to inform our application that we just created a new module. Gonna do it here. Out Doctrine. Let's make sure now the application still works. We didn't break anything. Yes, we did break something. Runtime example module out Doctrine could not be initialized. Let's see why. Class module. Let me use actually my helper. I just want to make sure I don't make mistakes, so that's why I have prepared myself a controller already. Class module, gonna copy and paste just to speed up the process, and namespace out Doctrine. Maybe here it is. I did a mistake with the namespace. No, still doesn't work. Okay, let me see again. Application. My application config. It's not that much writing, but as you can see, I can make mistakes. So application out Doctrine is not very good sign that we're starting with error, but we'll see. We'll see. Okay, let's take a look. The folder name. Yeah, it is out Doctrine, and it should have E at the end. So let me change that, and hopefully it's gonna work now. This is the risk of the live broadcasting and recording. Actually, I'm not broadcasting right now, but I'm recording live everything, so you can follow all my steps. I may make mistakes, which you probably will not make. Okay, so now our module is working. Let me go again and open the module. Now we have to add, of course, the standard methods, which we very well know. Let me show you that. Now, as I said, I have done it already, so I'm gonna copy and paste from there. Here it is. The standard two methods, I'm not gonna explain them right now, or maybe briefly I just will help you to recall. What we are doing here is just setting up the module config PHP and the standard autoloader, Zend standard autoloader. So in case we don't have other autoloaders, our classes in this module still can be loaded. Okay, now as we did that, we have to of course create a folder which is called config, and inside we have to create module config PHP as it is described here on line number 9 in our module class. Let me create this file, and I just will return one empty array. Okay, now my application should be working. Yeah, it works. Let's continue now with the configurations. We have to set the roots and other standard things. As I said, probably I'm not gonna touch this very much, I'm not gonna cover this. I have to set again the namespace here because I'm gonna use it in the configuration. I just will explain partially this configuration file. We set the invocables first. Our Doctrine index, our Doctrine controller, index controller. This is the controller which I'm planning to use for login and logout action. After that I will set up the root. How we will get to our controllers. This is actually what we are saying. I'm setting up one literal root which I'm calling alt doctrine, and by default we'll go to the action index on the index controller, and one child root which is called default. So after alt doctrine, if I type slash and I put something, this will be used as the name of the controller. If I continue typing and type slash again, the next thing which I will type is gonna be accepted as an action, and the third one, the third parameter, is the ID. Okay, this is about the root. Again, the standard settings for my view, for my presentation layer, and I think that's enough for now, just to make sure that everything works. We'll continue just in a second. Syntax error. Config on line 48, the last line. So I'm telling you what I'm gonna do. I actually will copy everything from here and paste it here, just to make sure I'm not making any mistakes, not to slow down this video. And after that I'm gonna explain different lines. Okay, I can remove actually these two lines. Those are different controllers. As you can see, I'm planning to create a tutorial on the registration and administration. I'm gonna remove that, and probably I'm gonna remove this as well. Hopefully that will continue work. Display exceptions, true. As you can see, I want to see the exceptions. Yep, now it works. Before we continue, I have to explain something. Our authentication module will depend on Doctrine ORM module. So please go ahead first, before you start your module, and download Doctrine ORM module from Marco Pivetta. Go to modules, for example, Zend Framework, come, search for Doctrine ORM module, go to GitHub and follow the instructions. You can use the composer to install the module, because the module which I'm demonstrating right now depends on Doctrine ORM module. Of course, Doctrine ORM module depends on another module which is called Doctrine module, only Doctrine module. But this too will be installed automatically for you if you use Composer, and all you have to do in your application config file, you just have to add these two lines after application. Of course, you won't have so many modules. I do have so many because my students are building modules, but eventually you will have only application, Doctrine module, Doctrine ORM module, and after that out Doctrine. So this is the prerequisite. You have to have Doctrine ORM module installed already. I'm not gonna show how to integrate Doctrine 2 in Zend Framework 2. It's done already by Marco Pivetta in his Doctrine ORM module and Doctrine module, of course. Okay, so let's continue further now. We are at this point, so now let's create the controller. I'm going to my controller folder, which I still don't have, so I'm creating source folder. This is a standard Zend Framework 2 structure, view folder. In the source, I will repeat again the name of my module. This is because I have to follow the PSR 0 requirements, pretty much standard. PSR, pretty standard, really 0. Doctrine, and here I'm creating the controller. And my controller is gonna be index.php. I hope I'm not making mistakes. If I do, I will correct myself. Okay, here in the index controller, I again will use my helper, index controller. Copy this, actions only, and remove what I don't need immediately right now. Okay, so far so good. We have one action, and I'm going to return the view model, which initially will be empty. I hope that you will appreciate the fact that I'm building everything from scratch, but not just explaining the code. I'm making some mistakes. Maybe the video will be a little bit longer, but you will avoid actually making the same mistakes as I do, probably. So I prefer myself to do it this way. I had, as you can see, everything built, so I just can explain. The video will be faster. But as I said, I prefer this approach. I deleted by purpose this module, and I'm starting creating it from scratch for you. Okay, out Doctrine. Here I have a controller, index, and inside I have index view, PHTML, index view script. Okay, and here I just will say h1, I'm in index. Let's try to recall what was the root to this controller. It was out Doctrine, and by default will be called the index section of the index controller in out Doctrine controller namespace. Okay, so let's try that and see if that works. Here we go, it works, as you can see. Just as an experiment, of course you don't have to do it, or you can do it if you like, of course. I want to retrieve all the records from my virtual database, but before we do that, let me explain you the virtual database. Doctrine allows us to do the code first, which means that we have interconnected objects entities, called entities. So first we have to build this database before we even start doing something. So next to the controller, I'm building entity. I'm creating entity folder, and here I just will copy the definition of my class, of my entity user, because it's a tedious job to create it. So I'm gonna copy instead of creating it a front of view right on the spot. I hope you're gonna forgive me that, because otherwise it's gonna take forever. Okay, let's say as a result of our system analysis, I have these characteristics which are represented by the properties of the object. Username, this is what I need. User password, user email. Actually, I already have shown to you this entity in the tutorial for CRUD with Zend Framework 2 and Doctrine 2. Language ID, user active, user question. It's simplified because I should use here language and role instead of integers. But as I said, I'm simplifying a little bit the example, so will be suitable for a novice. Okay, I'm gonna copy the code. The code, as usual, you can find in my GitHub repository called fmi slash wingman007 slash fmi. Okay. Another thing which is very important is to build a so-called repository next to the entities. In the repository, we're gonna keep all the DQL, Doctrine Query language, queries which we're gonna use in our application. I have done it, as I said already, so I'm gonna just skip that. You can look at the code in GitHub. Let me just explain you something here. Instead of using Doctrine Query language in your controller, you can encapsulate all this Doctrine Query language in this repository, because we don't want to mix such language, even though SQL or Doctrine Query language, with our PHP code. We want to use a fluent, object-oriented language. Okay, so now let me show you what I have done here. Of course, again, I'm gonna copy, otherwise it's gonna take too long. What I did is I'm just calling an instance of my entity manager here. Once I have the entity manager, I'm gonna try to retrieve all the records, in this case all the instances of my user object, user entity, if we speak in the terms of the virtual database. Okay, this is the way to do it. This get entity manager, actually I have to again create. I have to define this method. As you can see, there is nothing special. I have one member variable called event manager, not event manager, of course, entity manager. It's protected. I don't want to call again the service locator if I have already one instance of the entity manager. This is the implementation of the data mapper design pattern, which allows me to work with the virtual database and forget about the database, and all the persistence of my entities is done through this entity manager. the entity manager is babysitting for my entities. Okay, so when you install Doctrine ORM module, you will follow the instructions, and after that you will be able, if you have this module installed, to call the service manager, service locator, and just get one instance of the entity manager by saying this: Doctrine entity manager ORM default. During the installation process, you will be guided through the configuration, installation and configuration. Okay, so that's it. This is enough to get to the entity manager and show all the records which I have in my database, in my virtual database. Of course, I have to take care first of the view. Again, I'm gonna copy the view from my project, which I have done already. Index, and I'm gonna explain it a little bit. So again, standard things. I'm in all Doctrine index controller, index action, index PHTML. This is just to show you where I am when I'm calling this method. Echo this message if I have some kind of a messages here. Message this params from query message full. Okay, from query let me look at this. This actually I have done it just to show you another aspect of Zend Framework 2, just to show you how can you get argument from the query and give a default value. So if the message is not there, the value of the message will be full. Okay, so let's continue further. First showing the message var dump. We don't have to do that actually, but I just wanted to show you the users, these users, to show you what do we have. Actually, we'll have a collection of objects, of entities user. Again, here we don't have to do that. Let me just comment it for the moment. Continue further. Now I'm preparing the table, usually using the HTML tags. We are using tables to display such type of records, such type of data. Escape HTML, get username. And if you can recall here, we have accessory methods, getters and setters for hydration and extraction the data from our properties, which are private and are not accessible outside of the class. So set username, as you can see, and we have get username. So those are the methods I'm calling. Okay, let's see if that works. No, class out Doctrine user was not found in the chain, configured namespaces, FMI entity. Yeah, of course we have to take care of our module here. Just to save time, I'm gonna copy and paste everything. I described already the parts from line number 5 to 49. So let's look at now. Let's look at now here. We have to set up the driver for Doctrine ORM module. We have to tell the driver where our entities are. So that's why we are getting this error, and we have done it. We just did it right now. ORM defaults, drivers, these lines from 83 to 110 actually are doing that. We are describing where our entities are, and we are creating a driver for our Doctrine ORM module. Okay, let's try now and see if that works. Yep, it works, and as you can see, I have the records from the database, actually from my virtual database, of course persisted in a real database, and I'm gonna show you that just in a second. Here it is, my MySQL. So I just can say select everything from users, and here we go. As you can see here, I have this record, Stoyan, I have this record, and the correlation is this. Okay, so this index action actually have been created just for exercise, just to explain actually how you can get the records from the database. That's retrieve action from our CRUD, which is very well known, but I just wanted to repeat that. Okay, so now let's create the login action, and after that the logout action. I'm gonna show you that now. Again, I'm gonna copy and paste and just explain what I have done. As you can see, there are a lot of comments. I'm just trying to help with understanding all these things. Okay, so first we have to create a login form, which as usual has only two fields: username or email and password. So let's take care of that. And the form should be in a folder form, sibling to controller. I'm gonna again copy the file from form, which I have done it already, login form and login filter. So login form, it looks like that. Namespace all Doctrine form, use Zend form, login form, extends form, which is the Zend form. In the constructor, we are calling again the parent constructor with the name of the form. Set the attribute method post, because we're going to use this method to distinguish between the users which are for first time going to login to the login page and the ones which are trying actually to login. And we will have two fields, as I said, username and password. I'm adding another field. Actually, it's not a field, it's a checkbox. Remember me, and I'm gonna explain you this mechanism as well. And of course, we have to have a submit button. Standard form. Probably more interesting is the filter. Each form should have filters and validators, because we cannot allow the values without filtration and validation in our application. The correlation between the form and the filter is done by the name of different fields, which, as you can see here, are represented by objects. Username, it's of type text. Okay, and here I describe the filters which I want to be applied to this value, to this field, and after that the validators. Of course, you can change the validators. As I said, you can find the code in Wingman 007/FMI. Almost no brainer. You just have to use it. In this tutorial, I'm just trying to explain how everything was created and why we have these lines here. Okay, so index controller now. First we create the form. We instantiate one object of class form, login form. Here, if I want to change the name of the submit button, here it is the place to do it. again with educational purposes. As you can guess, it's done already for us here. Login, the same value, so it's not necessary, but just for the exercise I'm showing you how to change eventually the name of the button. Messages, no. Eventually we'll get messages from authentication service when we try to authenticate the user, so that's why I'm preparing this variable. Request, those are standard things now. We are getting the request object and we are checking if the request object is post. Initially it's not gonna be post, of course, so we're falling here to this part of the application, to this part of the action. Return ViewModel Error, your authentication credentials are not valid. Form, and I'm sending the form to the view, and the messages which I eventually will get. Okay, so now let's create the view script for this controller, for this action actually. View alt doctrine index, and I'm gonna copy again because I'm not gonna type it right now. View alt doctrine index login. Let me take a look. Yeah, I noticed something. Now I just installed Zend Framework 2.2.2. Before I was working with Zend Framework 2.2.1, and I didn't have any problems with this code. Here I'm using one so-called view helper to get the identity if there is any, and if there is no identity I didn't get any errors. Actually users is false or empty, there is a type conversion, and the if is not executed, we're executing else, not locked in. But for some reason in Zend Framework 2.2.2 it's throwing one exception, so that's why I've wrapped my code in the try catch. Okay, this is what I did. Login filter, let me check again. Alt doctrine view, alt doctrine index login. Okay, I just wanted to demonstrate how can you use the view helper identity to show the identity of the user, and here I'm displaying the username. If eventually we know already about this user, is if he has gone through the authentication process login form, I'm gonna show you his username. Right now I'm not expecting to see any username, of course, and following the rules which I have defined in my module config.php in the root section, I will get to my new action, newly created action login, typing index, which is the name of the controller, and after that login, the name of the action. So let me try that and see if that happens. Go home, could not file, localhost, blah blah blah. Okay, let's see where the problem is and let's fix it. www. How come it's trying to get there? I don't want that. Is it still thinking? Yes, I guess. Okay. Where did I type www? I did notice that. Come on, give me a break. Okay, I just typed localhost 10.122 just to get back to my home root, to my home page. Okay, let's start over. Alt doctrine index login. Yeah, class alt doctrine controller login form not found, blah blah. Yeah, of course I have to do my job. I have to say where my form is here. What I'm gonna do, actually, I'm gonna copy right now, not everything, but this snippet. Okay, here we go, it works. Now what I did is I explain it, the shortcuts. If I type user, for example, that means I mean alt doctrine entity user. If I type login form, then that means I mean alt doctrine form login form, and also alt doctrine form if I type only login filter. Okay, and because here on line 31 I'm using the short form login form, that's why I was getting initially the error message. Now everything is fine, and we went through this route of the application. Okay, so far so good. I know that in the database I have one user, Stoyan, with the password. Okay, so now I'll try to log in, but before that, actually, let me explain what's gonna happen now. If I try to log in, if request is paused, we will be here in this part of the application, in this condition logic. Okay, form set input filter, new login filter, this service locator. Why I'm doing that? I'm sending the service locator to my filter because I want to use one validator which will check if actually we have already such user. If we don't have this user, I don't even have to go through the authentication process. If there is no such user, we don't need to do anything. It's obvious that there is no such identity. Okay, so let's look at how that's done. Actually, this is done just for the exercise, just to show you how to use this validator. It's not necessary to be done. The authentication will fail. Actually, this is gonna be a disadvantage. That's why we have to be lazy. This is gonna be disadvantage because the hacker immediately will know that there is no such user, and he will keep trying until he guesses one of the users. Then when he's sure that there is such user, he just will change the password. Okay, so we don't have to do that. I will repeat that, but for the exercise I have done it just to show you how to use this filter. Okay, so a validator, sorry. So the validator name is Doctrine module validator object exists, and as you can see, I have to send the object repository, and this is how we get it. Service manager. Once I send the service manager can return the Doctrine entity manager. From Doctrine entity manager, I'm calling the get repository method, which will give me the repository of the entity user, and that's all the validator needs. After that, I have to tell the validator which field to use. In this case is username, which property actually. They could be, as you can guess, more than one. I can send array. Okay, so this validator comes with Doctrine ORM module, so we don't have to actually write this validator, which is very good. That's why I'm not integrating manually, because otherwise I have to write a lot of view helpers, validators, not a lot, but I still have to do it manually. Okay, Let me try with somebody which doesn't exist. As I said, just for fun I'm doing that to show you how the validator works. No object matching array, username, blah blah, was found. As you can see, the hacker, the potential hacker, immediately will know that the username 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. doesn't exist in our database. So this is a weakness of the application. I weakened the application by purpose just to show you this validator. Okay, let's continue with the explanations now. We have done actually another very important thing. We haven't done it yet there, I think, but we'll do it. Before we continue and submit something, let's do the following. Let's first set up so-called Zend Authentication service. If you can recall from the previous lections, previous tutorials, I did the same when I did the authentication controller without Doctrine. Zend Authentication service. I have set up the Zend Authentication service. But notice something now. When we call Zend Authentication service, in fact what we are getting is return service manager Doctrine Authentication Service ORM default. So we are replacing actually the Zend Authentication service, the original one which comes with Zend Framework 2, with another authentication service which has been created by Marco Pivetta in his Doctrine ORM module. This is very important because our controller very easy can use the ordner, if we can call it this way, the Zend Authentication service. All we have to do is just replace here this code. I have a lot of comments here. This mail transport is for our next tutorial, but just to make sure that I didn't make any errors, I just copied everything. Okay, so now in our controller we are getting the authentication service, and I show it to you what actually we will be getting. We will get the Doctrine authentication service instead of the original Zend authentication service. Otherwise we will be getting this one, Zend authentication service. Actually I'm tempted to show you the difference, okay? And I'm gonna do it right away. This is our authentication module which we have created without Doctrine. This is again a login form but without using the Doctrine. Module user table, and we have used the configuration in the global configuration, I guess. So let's go there. I just want to show you the difference, that's all. Config autoload global. I'm gonna show you now the authentication service. Okay, I actually have moved this to the configuration of the module alt, so I can exchange them. Config, module config, service manager. Here we go. I'm gonna show you the difference. This is the most important difference, actually one of the important differences. Service manager, aliases, Zend authentication service. I'm doing this trick just to make sure that when I call the service manager and call, okay, give me and ask to give me the Zend authentication service, I'm gonna get only one authentication service. Is not gonna create a new instance and return a new instance. Invocables, my out service Zend authentication service. Okay, this is an instance of the Zend authentication service, as you can see here, and it's known in the service manager under the name Zend authentication service. But notice now what I have done here. In my module, also the places where I'm defining this are different. In the module, now in my application, under the very same name, I'm returning something different. I'm not returning anymore the original Zend Framework 2 authentication service. I'm returning the Doctrine authentication service ORM created by Marco Pivetta in his Doctrine ORM module. Okay. This is the difference. Okay. Now, once I get the out service, which could be original Zend, or as you can see in this case Doctrine, only this is the difference. Once I have it, I get the adapter. This is the authentication adapter. My authentication service actually is a container for two adapters. One of them is called authentication adapter, another one is the storage adapter. Authentication adapter we're using to do the authentication. The storage adapter is used to store the information about the user somewhere, and we are going to store the information in the session. Okay, so we are getting the authentication adapter and we are setting the identity value to data username. Okay, wait a second. Password. Just give me 1 second. Let me take a look here. Okay. Of course, this data comes from our form. Here it is. And after that we'll explain. After that, actually, we're not going to explain anything. After that, we're just calling our authentication service authenticate. Okay, so the question is how actually my adapter knows where my username and the password is stored in my virtual database. Okay, and this is done in my module config PHP in lines 55 to 78. Authentication key, I'm here in Doctrine, I'm using the authentication key. This is the decision made by Marco Pivetta, the guy who has created the module ORM Doctrine ORM module. ORM default, notice now, object manager, Doctrine ORM entity manager, identity class, all Doctrine entity user. Because I'm using right now a virtual database which is created by entities, I have to tell my adapter which entity to use, and the entity which is going to be used, as you can see, is user. Now I have to point to different properties. Identity property, USR name. Credential property, USR password. Credential callable. Okay, this is very important function. Actually, it's a closure in this case because it's anonymous function. Here, used here. Okay, so entity user, we're sending the user, one instance of the user, and the password given, and the given password. Here, I'm defining my static salt. This is how the password gets encrypted. I cannot save in the database plain passwords, so that's why I have to encrypt them, and I'm using MD5 encryption mechanism But on top of that, just to make it harder to be decrypted eventually, that's why I'm using a static salt, and I'm using a dynamic salt, which is already saved into one of the properties of my object user and the password given. Okay, and on top of that, I'm checking just to make sure that the user active is set to 1. Those are the conditions which I have to meet in order to identify an user. Okay, and as you can see, all this is described in module config. It's very convenient because you can change all these settings and conditions. Okay, let's go back to the index controller. Now, once I have everything set up, I can call the alt service authenticate and see if I have such a user and the credential, the password, is correct. Okay, so let me do that. As I said, I'm sure I have Stoyan with the password. Those are very complicated topics, so please don't hesitate to put comments and ask questions. I will try to answer everybody. Login. Here we go. Authentication successful. This is the message which I get from the authentication service. Logged in as Stoyan. This actually comes from our view helper, and here in this case I just show a link to the logout action, which we still don't have. Okay, so let's first create then the logout action, and after that I will continue with the explanations. As I said, I already have created it, so all I'm gonna do is just copy and paste. You will find more methods in the repository, eventually with comments, so I hope that this will be helpful for you. Action logout, and of course I have to create the view script for this action. Out here, out doctrine, of course, view out doctrine, index login. Now I have to copy the logout action, which in fact will never be used. As you can see, is absolutely empty. I will go and forward immediately after the logout. Okay, I just added the logout to be able to log out right now and show you different aspects. Okay, as you can see, not logged in, and I'm still expecting the user to enter the username, password, and eventually check the button, the check box, remember me. Okay, so let me now get to this remember me mechanism. And actually not only to remember me mechanism, but to the storage adapter of the authentication service. Okay, here it is where the magic happens. Out result is valid. We're asking actually the result, are you valid? If it's valid, then we get the identity. Out result get identity. In other words, we're getting one object of class user. This is one of our entities. All the entities have unique identifier, which is called USR ID in this case, in the case of my user entity. So we are getting one of those objects. Alt service get storage write identity. So this is all you have to do to store this object into the session. And everywhere in your application after that, you can get to the authentication service and ask if this user actually already has identity, and ask for different from different aspects for this user. You can get to different properties of this object user. Now, if I want to implement the mechanism so-called Remember Me, what I have to do? Probably you know that the session works based on the cookies. In order to use the session, the server sets a cookie on your browser, on your computer, which is called PHP Session ID, PHP Session ID in other words. And this PHP Session ID cookie gets a unique identifier, a unique ID. Each time when the browser gets back to the server, this cookie is sent in the headers. The server compares this value with the files eventually in the file system or in the database, and can recognize the session by this unique ID. So if something has been written already for this user, if we know something about this this guy or girl, we can find this information recorded on the server by this unique identifier. But if you close your browser, or if you only close your browser, this cookie gets removed. So the next time when you go again to the same server, to the same domain, actually nothing will be sent to the server, and the server of course will not know anything about you. What we are trying to do here is just the extent the time to live of our cookie, and even though the user closes his browser, we want this cookie to stay. And how long we want this cookie to stay? We want 14 days. We have to calculate 14 days in seconds. So this is shown here. This calculation is shown on the same row. Now, if data remember me, which means if the user has checked this checkbox, then extend the session TTL, time to live, to the time. In other words, 14 days. So the user will be remembered for 14 days. That's all. That's all you have to do. And of course we use again the Zend, and by purpose here I'm using the full namespace. Zend Session Manager, just to show you what I'm using right now. We are calling another component of Zend, which is the Session Manager, and telling the Session Manager remember me and for how long. That's it. It's not necessary if you don't want to have this mechanism. All you have to do is just save the user. Even this is not mandatory, even though you already know about this user, you don't have to write it, but it's a very good idea to write it. It's up to you. Okay, so now I explain it to you how everything is done. If I get messages, as you can see from the result, I loop through all the messages and I just concatenate them in one variable messages, and I send it to the view to be displayed. That's all I'm doing here. And this is the identification done with the Doctrine 2, but as I explain it to you, it's very easy. In the Service Manager, all you have to do is just replace the Zend authentication service, and our authentication will work with or without Doctrine. Right now I show it to you how to do it with Doctrine, and with the previous tutorial I have shown how this is done without the usage of Doctrine. Okay, that's it about the authentication and the mechanism Remember Me, and I'm gonna show you that right now. Actually, Now I'm gonna show you with and without checking the box. I know already the username Stoyan with the password. First I'm gonna show you what's gonna happen if I log in without checking the box Remember Me, and even without logging out. I'm gonna show you that the server will not remember me. Okay, so just a second. Now Stoyan password. I'm not sure I type it correctly. Password, and I'm hitting login. No, I don't want to be remembered. Now logged as Stoyan, so I can log out. But before I log out, I'm gonna show you that the server will not remember me. I'm not gonna see this when I close and open again the browser, because the cookie will be destroyed. Okay, and after that I'm gonna show you the same thing, but if I check the checkbox remember me. No. Okay, quite a lot of things. So now look at this, pay attention on that. Not logged in. So I will repeat again. What I did is I used my username and my credential without checking the remember me, and I said login. I didn't hit logout, but I just simply closed my browser and the cookie was destroyed. Now I'm open up again my browser, and as you can see I have to log in again. But this time what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna check the checkbox. Password. Let me type it again. I'm gonna hit remember me checkbox, login. I don't want to be remembered. And notice now I'm gonna do exact same thing. Now without hitting logout, I'm just gonna close my browser and open again. The cookie will be destroyed if I didn't set the TTL, the time to live, to 14 days, but I did it already. So now you'll see that even though I close the browser, the cookie is still there. The server will know me. Again, here it is the difference. Okay, I have been remembered, logged in as Stoyan. Okay, that's very important but very interesting mechanism, and I just show it to you how it's done. Now about the logout, I just went ahead of myself and I show it to you logout action because I just need it. By the way, if you do logout, of course you will be forgotten. So if you want to be remembered, don't hit logout. Okay, you don't do this usually on the public computers, of course, because if somebody else goes to the same URL, you will be in already. So that's why I don't do it on the public computers. Out. This get service locator get Zend authentication service, which, as I explained it to you already, will be actually Doctrine behind the scene. But our controller doesn't care. It's absolutely transparent for him. It could be replaced very easy. Out has identity. Again, this is only a gymnastic. You don't have to do that. I'm just getting the identity. All you have to do is just say out clear identity, and that's it. Session manager, new session, forget me. So this is what I did. If you choose to log out, you will be forgotten, and this is the right thing to do actually. And the last thing is just to redirect again to out Doctrine default controller index action login. Okay, so we'll be on the login form again just in a few seconds. That's all. So I'm getting the authentication service. As you can see, here is a simple demonstration how you can get the entity in your controllers and actions, and this is the most important command. You clear the identity, and after that, this also is very important. If you implemented already the Remember Me mechanism here, please don't forget just to say forget me, so the user will be forgotten on this computer. Okay, so let me show you the same trick again. Now I will log in by checking the checkbox Remember Me. Now, okay, I have been logged in as Stoyan because I checked the checkbox Remember Me. Now I'm gonna say logout, and you'll see now that when I actually close my browser and open again, I still will not be recognized. I'm not in now. Okay, that's it, folks, and I hope you enjoy this video, you understand the concepts. I will repeat again, you can find the code in wingman007/fmi, and you can use it, of course, if you like it. Thank you again, and see you next time.